Welcome to Zoom O'Clock with your host, Tessy Antony de Nassau. This podcast brings you enlightening discussions with leading experts and public figures directly to your ears.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zoom O'Clock with your host, Tessy Antony de Nassau. Today, I have again a wonderful and very, very interesting guest for you. Rebelo. She is a licensed certified social worker and has a very, very interesting profession. But before we get into that, hi, Lane. How are you and where are you?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I am in Ashland, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston.
Very nice. How is it there at the moment? We are in June now. So tell me a little bit.
It is like there's a saying that if you don't like the weather in New England, just wait 5 minutes. And this week has been an example of that because last week it was very cool and rainy. And this week it is very hot and feels like August. So it has been quite the change in the past week. It's very hot today.
Oh, well, enjoy. You're kind of the same. So we're in the same boat. Good that we're inside here having a little chat. So for our listeners, let me introduce you and also the people from YouTube who will see us in person. Let me introduce Lane to you. Lane is the author of the best-selling baby sign language, Made Easy, the complete guide to baby sign language, and my first book of baby signs. She is the founder of Tiny Signs, an award-winning baby sign language program. As a licensed social worker, Lane worked for many years with families in the Boston area. Lane began studying American Sign Language in 2006 after her first baby was born and was amazed by all she had to say. She lives with her husband and 2 children in Metro West Boston. Lane, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive into the topic straight away. As I told you before the recording, I am expecting a little baby. And as such, I'm kind of equipping myself with all of these new and exciting tools and studies that make being a parent and having a baby in 2021 easier, more fun, make it nicer for the baby too, I guess. And I think sign language for children, for little babies, has been something that is extremely intriguing for me. So tell me, Lane, how did you find it to start sign language? I can see from your bio that you started on your own daughter with that. What was your experience? And how was the experience as well with your environment, with the people around you when you started doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have 2 children. My oldest is 15 and then my younger is 10. And so when my first was born, I had been working with children and families. And then when she joined us, I stayed home. And so I was home with her full time. And I was reading all the books, and like you're in the position, like you're doing now, you're kind of, consuming information and trying to figure out, all the best things you can do. And I had heard about baby signing. People have signed with their babies as long as there's been deaf people, which is forever, right? So anytime there's been people signing with children forever. But as far as a movement, it kind of started in the 80s. But it was very much in the fringe, it was not common. But I had heard about it and I was curious about it. So I got a book and read it and said, okay, I'll give this a try. And so I started, and I started signing with my daughter when she was probably around 7 months. And around 8 months, she started signing back, but I was very confused by what she was doing because the book I had got from the library did not do a good job explaining what to expect when your baby starts signing back. So it was very confusing for me. But nonetheless, we went on to have success. I became just super interested in it opened up this whole communication with her at such a young age. She started picking up signs by, her first birthday, she was just picking up signs every day and signing so many things. And I remember thinking it was like a window into her mind. she was starting to speak around, her first birthday. She would say mama and kitty, and but kitty sounded like, the words are so rough at that early age. So her speech was developing, but the signing made communication a whole different level. She could use the signs to talk about what she was seeing, what she was thinking, and she'd use the signs that she had to talk about things she couldn't explain. So it really was amazing to me. And my husband and I were both kind of like blown away by this. And so I became kind of obsessed, I guess, at the time. I really wanted, I was like, why doesn't everybody do this? When you find something fantastic, you look around and think, why doesn't everyone do this? This is amazing. So I started learning more and more. I did some training programs specifically for the signing with infants and toddlers. And then started to be more interest. And I started running little classes just here locally, like at the recreation center, in a church basement, that kind of thing. Just little groups of moms and babies and grandparents and babies and dads and babies would come, and we'd sing songs and we'd learn signs. And that's just kind of how it started. That's how Tiny Signs was born, in this very local, tiny way. I mean, we're talking 2008. I didn't have a big website or Instagram. It was very local. And it just kind of grew from there. And it got to the point where I was just running around teaching classes all over. I was doing trainings for early childhood educators. I would go into big daycare centers and do workshops, and it just kind of grew. And so then I started teaching online a bit so that I could reach more people, because I'd get people from Europe and South America saying, okay, I want to take your class, but I can't come to Boston. So I started teaching online. And then from there, the books came, the 3 books, 2018, 19, and 21. So yeah, just kind of grown and grown.
Wow,
and,
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's been super fun. And the other part of your question was as far as what my experience was. I mean, we look back on those pre-verbal, before talking, months and days before our little ones were really speaking in a way that we could understand them articulately. I feel like we would have missed so much if we hadn't had this tool to communicate, because there's so much that happens. And I think people, adults, we look at infants and toddlers who are not speaking yet and think that they're not thinking, right? Just because they're not speaking, we just think that there's just nothing, necessarily happening in there. And they're, but they're so much smarter. And that's the thing that I love, why I continue to be passionate about doing this, because I get to selfishly enjoy it over and over again as my students share with me stories of their amazement, because they'll be like, oh my goodness, this happened and my child signed this and I had no idea he even knew what that was. And, they get to see how smart their little ones are, because we assume that, there's not as much going on up here that is really happening.
So you said you started when your daughter was 7 months.
Yes.
I have 2 questions for you. So would you say the earlier the better? So even at birth already starting really with the signs, how many signs would you say is the best? What are the major signs? We can show them on camera here, but also explain them verbally for the people who are listening to it through their ears on a podcast. And then also the other part of my question, when you said it was confusing when she signed back, what does that mean? What was that experience really?
So that one of the signs that I chose to teach her, which is a sign that many people start with, is a sign for eat or food. So you touch all your fingers to your thumb. And I should also back up and say that the signs that I use are American Sign Language signs. I'm in the US, and American Sign Language is the language of the deaf community in the US and most of Canada. Mm-hmm. That being said, there's British Sign Language, there's French Sign Language, there's Aslan. So, depending on where you're listening, I recommend that folks look into the language of the deaf community where you live and try to find a dictionary and learn that, because what I find is that many people who become interested in this when they're like myself as a baby for baby sign language, then just become fascinated and then go on to learn about deaf history and culture where they live and the language of that community, which I think is so valuable and I highly recommend. And but that being said, some people live in places where there's just not a lot of resources. So some people choose to use American Sign Language strictly for this kind of communication, just because there are a lot of resources out there. Mm-hmm. So that being said, back to the sign. So I just wanted to clarify, because this is the sign in ASL, but it might not be the sign for eat where you are. So, so some people, it's funny. Many people think that there's one sign language, like it's just a universal.
Yeah, for the baby one especially, right?
Well, right. But baby sign language isn't actually a language. It's a communication technique. And this is what causes so much confusion, because baby sign language can be Russian and spoken Russian and sign language and American Sign Language. Baby sign language can be French and English and American Sign Language. It can be spoken French and French Sign Language. So it's a combination of speech and sign language of any combination. So it's really a technique more than a language, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So the sign for eat in ASL, you touch all your fingers to your thumb and tap them at your mouth. That's a sign for eat and food in ASL. So I had been teaching that to her. She had started solid foods. I would sign, do you want to eat? Put her in the high chair. And so about, I'm not sure, within a few days, maybe a week, she started doing this. And tapping an open hand, tapping her ear, which I thought was strange. And the book I had read didn't say anything about this. And she seemed fine. I remember saying to my husband, do you think she has an ear infection? She keeps, how when babies have an ear infection, sometimes they pull or touch their ear. Mm-hmm. I thought she has no fever. She seems happy, but she keeps touching her ear. And then but it didn't make sense I didn't pick up on it. And so then one day I said, do you want to eat? And she started doing it. I thought, oh my goodness, she's been saying eat to me, but it just doesn't look the way I expected it to. I expected her to do what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, that makes no sense, because she was 8 months old. And just like your sons, when they first started speaking, they didn't start speaking fluently, flawless, language. We call it approximations. Babies say words close to what the word is. So, like I said, one of my daughter's first spoken words was kitty or cat, but it came out. That's the sound she made. That was kitty. And that, right? I'm sure your children had early words that, sounded something like what you meant, but you know what they meant. And It was an approximation of the word. It's the same with signs. So the early signs, your baby might touch their hand to their mouth, but they're probably not going to get the hand shape completely perfect. It's going to be like an early version.
Oh, very good.
So that's why I have 3 books. And the third one is more of a picture book for parents and children to read together. But the first 2 are, more instructional for parents and caregivers. And each sign talks about what to look for, what your baby's version might look like, because there are some common, babies tend to do them in similar ways. So for the sign for more, which many people have seen, you touch your hands to your thumbs, again, in American Sign Language, and tap them twice in front of you. Many babies do that. It looks like a clap. Babies might bang their fists together. They might touch their pointer to their open palm. They might just grab their hands together. So there's kind of when I've been doing this for over a decade, I can see a video of a baby and be like, they're signing water. I've had instances where like a mom is sitting in a class with me, facing me, we're sitting on the floor, baby is propped on her lap. And the mom's talking to me. She's like, I've been trying to get her to sign water and she just won't. And as soon as the mom says water, the baby goes like this. And the mom's not realizing that just touching that pointer finger to the chin is their version of the sign for water, which is done with 3 fingers at the chin. So you really have to train your eye so you know what you're looking for, so you don't miss it. Because a lot of times people think baby sign language isn't working, but they're just missing it because it doesn't look like you might expect.
Very, very interesting. Wow, that is a really good thing to look out for, especially also for us who are going to be very new into this. And make sure as well, just for the people listening in and also looking at this video, that we share links to your books, and that I get the parent book as well. You have already on your website, which I think is really interesting, the quick start guide to sign language. Decide when to start. So all of these questions, how many signs should I start? Actually, questions that I asked you, a lot of people tell me it's milk, more, water, Milk, more water. What else? Banana.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people tell me for some reasons, I don't know.
If your baby likes bananas, if your baby hates bananas, that's a terrible choice.
Yeah, I think these are the ones where people are like, oh, okay, that is interesting. So how many signs do you think you should start with a newborn, for example?
Sure. So let's go back to the question you had about when to start. The answer is you can start anytime. Most babies start signing back in the 8 to 12 month range. That's the most common. If you're going to have a bell curve, that's kind of the middle of that curve. That being said, I've had students whose babies started signing at earlier at 5 or 6 months. Mm-hmm. That's more rare. It's more common in that 8 to 12 month range. So as far as when to start, I mean, there's no harm in beginning. You start speaking to your baby when they're born. You can start signing with them from day one. However, with those first few months, first of all, you're exhausted and there's so many things that you're dealing with. I think, that fourth trimester, the first 3 months, it's like, take a break, focus on getting yourself right side up. And if you're, super enthusiastic and you want to start signing, then go ahead, but don't feel pressure to do so. I mean, it's really such a crazy time. And you can start whenever, but the reality is that a lot of people who start really early, say when their baby's 3 months or 4 months or 5 months, they get discouraged. They just say, this is not going to work. This is taking forever. Mm-hmm. And that breaks my heart, because if you stick with it, it will 100% work. There's no reason that it won't. So the only reason that I would say that, it's okay to wait to 6 months plus is that you're less likely to get discouraged and quit, So it just depends on your personality, really. If you're a very patient person and you know that you're not going to be discouraged and give up, and you're eager to start, then by all means start. Babies will just soak it up. The other thing too is that your baby's vision is really developing in those early months, so they can't really see across the room. So if you are signing in those early months, you really need to do it pretty close, because baby's vision is still developing. Mm-hmm. So you really need to kind of be close for that. So that's the when to start is, when you want, but just keep in mind that you're going to have to be patient if your baby is really little. As far as how many signs to start with, I usually tell people who really are like, just tell me what to do. Some people just want to say, tell me what to do. 4 is a great number to start with. That being said, if you want to start with 10, that's okay too. The only thing to keep in mind is, as we talked about, when baby's early signs are sometimes hard to understand. So if your baby starts doing this and you've been showing them 20 signs, it might be hard to kind of narrow down what this one is. Do you know what I mean?
So the hand waving you're showing. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
The hand waving. Right. So, that could, if you've taught your baby 20 signs and you've taught them the sign for all done, which is twisting the hands away, all these are in the dictionary. So if people are listening to the podcast, if you go to the website, there'll be a link. There's a dictionary that shows all these signs in American Sign Language. If you've taught your baby the sign for all done, and you've taught your baby the sign for music, and you've taught your baby the sign for ball, and your baby starts doing this, it can be a little hard to figure out, like, okay, which one is that? So by keeping the list a little bit small at the beginning, it makes it easier when they do start signing to know which one it is. Mm-hmm. But, it's just something to think about. But you can really start with what works for you. As far as which signs to start with, there are some ones that people consider. You said people have told you, do milk, water, more, whatever. And there are some kind of core ones that are in that quick start guide that you downloaded. But something I think that I do differently is I put those in kind of the useful signs bucket. Those are kind of the signs that we as parents find useful. We hope that our babies will tell us when they're hungry, when they want milk. We want those things. But babies have their own priorities and their own interests. Mm-hmm. And so I also really encourage people to pick a few playful signs, which are the type of signs that are based on your baby's interests. So if your baby loves bananas, lives for bananas, that's a great choice of a sign. If your baby hates bananas, it's a terrible choice of a sign. Your baby's not going to sign banana to you. Why would they want to talk to you about bananas if they hate them? So you really have to look at your baby as an individual, right? You have 2 children already. They don't love the same things, right? Yeah. They have different preferences. Exactly. So part of teaching this is really observing and dialing in on your unique baby and seeing what makes them tick and picking signs based on their interests. If you have a baby, one of my students, little one, would crawl over to the glass door in the back of the house. They had a bird feeder and would watch the birds come in every morning. That was part of that baby's routine. They loved watching the birds at the bird feeder. Their first sign was the sign for a bird. Yeah. That might not be the first sign for everybody, but for that special little one, that was their interest. So part of it is looking at your unique baby and discovering what their interests are and picking signs based on that so they can talk to you about what they love.
Very interesting. That is a really good advice for sure. We are, well, here in my household, my partner is extremely excited. He is really, well, I am excited. I think it's a really good thing. Also psychologically, I think it's very, very good for the baby, which we will get into in a minute. But as seeing him being so excited, like he has read already a book about it. I printed the starter guide and I haven't even read it yet. It was lying there because I was doing something else. And he already said, okay, yeah, I read the starter guide. And he was signing to me all of these different signs. And he was like, milk is quite funny. And I was like, yeah, milk is a very funny one. And he showed it to his friends and everything. So he is extremely excited, which makes me kind of happy to be able to share that, right? What is your experience with the parents? Is it more moms, more dads, both? How has it been received so far?
I would say that the majority of parents that are coming looking for information is generally moms. I have had a few very enthusiastic dads, but the majority, I would say, overwhelming majority are moms. And often they'll even say that their husband's not really sure about it. They're worried that it will affect their speech development or that it will be just unnecessary.
It doesn't hinder any on that, right? Because I have heard that before as well, that people would say, well, will the baby be able to speak properly? Yes, of course.
Well, here's the important thing to remember. When you're using baby sign language with a baby that is hearing, right? A baby that hears, each time you do the sign, you're going to say the word, right? So if you sign milk and open and close your hand and say milk, their speech development is going to be just fine. The only way it would negatively impact their speech development is if you didn't speak when you said it. But that's not what we do. We speak and sign simultaneously. It's bimodal communication, right? We're doing 2 things at once. So saying that it will hinder your baby's speech is like even babies who don't do baby sign language gesture, right? You've ever seen a baby who doesn't speak yet wave bye-bye?
Yeah.
That's baby signing. They're gesturing, right? Just they've seen their parents and their grandparents and everybody around them say bye-bye, and then they start doing it. So somebody says bye-bye and they wave, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't, and then when they're able to, they say bye-bye. It does not negatively impact their speech. It's just part of the process. It's almost like saying if your baby crawls, they're never going to walk. It doesn't make sense. So, and the research supports that that's not true. Research has shown that not only does it support language development. In fact, many speech therapists, if a baby does have a speech delay, recommend using sign language as they're working through therapy to get their speech along, because there's so much frustration that comes from not being able to communicate. When you have a toddler or preschool age child who is speech delayed, most speech therapists say start using sign language if you haven't already, because your child is so frustrated. So it definitely supports overall language development, and the research supports that. And I'll share the link with you with this kind of a summary of what that looks like.
Yes, absolutely. Before we go back to the dad part as well, one question which goes with what we just said. Is there research that shows that actually sign language with also oral language actually brings some incredible benefits to children, where they have followed children over the last decade who have had sign language with normal language and education from their parents versus the ones who didn't? How that affected their schooling? Is there any research on that we can?
Yeah, there is some research. The most kind of longitudinal study that was done over a longer period of time from infant to school age was done quite some time ago. There's been more research lately that's more covers shorter periods of time. It would be great if there was another more current long-term study of how it affects speech over time. But the research that was done in the 80s and 90s that kind of looks at children from birth through elementary ages shows that the children who signed and gestured versus those who didn't had advanced language skills, higher IQ by 12 points, bigger vocabularies, strong early literacy skills, all those sorts of things. There's also research by a woman named Marilyn Daniels who really looked specifically at a kindergarten and I believe first grade classrooms and looked at how signing in the classroom impacted language development, literacy, but also the social and emotional development and tone of the classroom, which was really interesting. So people have definitely looked at this. I wish there was more, but it's all been positive. I've never read anything that there was any negative impact.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. No, I'm definitely extremely looking forward to start this with my partner. And as we said before, then you said it's more mothers who come, and then dads, they're a little bit more skeptical. And what happens then?
Well, often when I see happen, and this also happens with grandparents too. Sometimes husbands, partners, grandparents are skeptical and they think, oh, this might have a negative effect, or this might not work, or this is a waste of time. And they're not super supportive. And then the mom is often kind of just on her own, like a, soldier by themselves on this. And then once the baby does start signing back, everybody gets on board because they're like, oh my gosh, look at this. And then everybody gets excited and kind of jumps on board when mom's done all the hard work to get it going. And then everybody jumps on the bandwagon to say, this is great. I love this. So, but the wonderful thing is that some of those folks who were resistant at first and then kind of convert when they see it working with their child or their grandchild, then become the biggest advocates. I have some grandparents who are like the biggest fans of this because they're just blown away by what their grandchildren can do. They remember what their children were like at that age at, 18 months, 2 years old. And they look at their grandchildren and they're just amazed. And so they become these huge, fans of this and tell all their other friends that are grandparents to do it. So I think it's wonderful.
That's really nice. Well, I will see, we'll see how the grandparents going to react to that, because I spoke to my parents about it, and, my mom, they had twice twins and my sister, and they're all very skeptical. Here in Europe, people are still very skeptical about it, where people say, really, my twin brother had a baby. He's 8 months old. And we talked about it, and he as well was like, oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think it would be a really good thing to introduce more of that here, and people can get in touch with you anyways, right?
Yeah. I feel like in the UK, it seems to be pretty popular. So maybe it's the rest of Europe that needs to catch up a little bit, because I feel like the UK, it has definitely grown in popularity. I've seen there's some folks teaching British Sign Language in this manner that are seeing, the enthusiasm is definitely there. I don't know about the rest of Europe, but that it spreads. Anything that's fun and positive takes a little time to get traction. I mean, I just look from the time when I started doing this, when mine was a baby, compared to how things are now. Now it's just common here. I mean, every daycare center in the infant room uses at least a few basic signs with the babies and the toddlers. I mean, it's just almost like just common, whereas 15 years ago, unheard of. So.
No, for sure. And I do agree with that. For Luxembourg, for example, I have an assistant teaching degree, and among the other degrees that I have, and for babies specifically, for preschoolers, and we have not learned any of that. So I really do hope that podcasts such as these and other information really sparks the thirst for something new, because I think it could really change how children are being perceived, but also for their mental health and to ease frustrations. I think that could be a really, really good tool, definitely.
We all want to be understood, right? We all want to be understood and share our thoughts and feelings. So, I mean, it doesn't, that desire and that need doesn't begin when you're 3, that need and desire to connect, to communicate is there from the beginning. So
for sure. No, I will definitely, and make sure I put all of the resources below. Any other resource you have that we didn't have time to speak about, please send it to me. I will make sure it's under the podcast videos, the recordings, and also the YouTube video for everyone to explore. Please do get in touch with Lane if you are an expectant parent, a grandparent, or even an educator, work in the Ministry of Education, wherever you're from, whatever you do. I think baby sign language definitely enhances the quality of life of the child in such an incredibly important way. We will keep you posted, Lane, on how it's going to go, and going to use your services definitely for our little one once we get started with that. And yeah, I think we have run out of time, big time already. I soak up all of that information. It's so interesting. So just for the people listening as well, you see the link below, but also the link is tinysigns.com for the people who want to get in touch straight away and look at all of the amazing things. There's quite a few guides that you have online, which are free to download, which is extremely kind and generous of you for us new parents as well to just explore if that's something for us before we commit a little bit more. So definitely go and look it up, because you're not going to lose anything. You can just gain on some cool, new, innovative methods to connect to your child. And dear Lane, thank you so much for your time. This was fantastic. We speak offline a little bit more. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was such a nice pleasure. So for everyone else listening, and also for the people looking at YouTube, please do subscribe, comment, rate, and share this podcast and recording, because only like that will we be able to share the love. The podcast has been rated globally among the top 10 in self-development and education. You can also become a patron of the podcast now, which will help me to make it more professional and allocate more time towards it. So also go and check out on the website tessydenassau.com how to become a patron and find out more about the Zoom o'clocks. And until we meet again, dear Lane, thank you so much for your time. And for everyone else, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Zoom o'clock. We hope this discussion was insightful and has provoked some new ideas for you. Please share and subscribe. If you like to keep in touch with your host, you can find her on Instagram under Tessy_from_Luxembourg and on Twitter under Tessy_DE.